Phil Foden remains only 5% owned going into game week 8, and as a manager with a wildcard still available, is it just a no-brainer to bring him in for the weekend? We're going to be discussing all of that in today's game week 8 team selection video. So as always, if you look forward to it, make sure to drop a like and of course, smash that subscribe button for daily fantasy content. Enough waffling, let's get into today's video. So first up, a quick recap on how the team is looking going into game week 8 without any transfers made. 2 free transfers available, 0 in the bank. So I haven't got much wiggle room at all with this team. And as you can see, the first thing that we need to discuss with my current team is Bukayo Saka. Now, of course, he is yellow flagged right now. We know that he wasn't pictured in training for Arsenal yesterday, and we do have the Arteta press conference today, but we're going to get nothing. I can guarantee you right now, even though we haven't had the Arsenal press conference, Arteta is going to tell us nothing. So we have to go into this game week with the idea that Saka is a risk, but we most likely expect him to start. Let's be real. I think we all expect Saka to play, but we have that slight feeling in the back of our minds where we don't actually know the full outcome. And of course, depending on what situation you are in right now going into game week 8, depends on how you view Saka as a potential keep or a potential sell. As I discussed at the start of the video, I still have my wildcard available, and that puts me in a very unique position compared to other managers. As we know, Arsenal's fixtures are fantastic from game week 12 onwards, while they're coming into a bit of a trickier period over the next 4 game weeks. Now, if I didn't have my wildcard available, I would just keep Bukayo Saka 100% because I'm selling him to want him back in game week 12 regardless. But with the wildcard available to myself, I'm looking at the next 4 game weeks asking myself, maybe is this an opportunity to jump on a short-term punt, whether that be a Phil Foden, a Palmer, or someone like a Son, and then wildcard those Arsenal assets back in. So we are going to be discussing that, and of course, that might be one of my free moves to make. The rest of the team, I am more than happy with. Yes, double Liverpool defence is not ideal, but at the same time, are there any defenders out there that I'm desperate to own for game week 8? Most likely not. And of course, yes, I still have Eze in my team. Might be part of a transfer strategy that we're going to talk about in the end of the video, but I'm bullish on Eze as an asset in general. And I do like the fact that he is now so lowly owned, and I have the talisman, that Crystal Palace team. And finally, we touched on it in the transfer plans video, but Ollie Watkins as well, away against Fulham. I hate that fixture. I do not feel good about going with double Aston Villa. So, of course, in today's video, do I sell Watkins to come down to a cheaper option to free up funds for another move? That's how the team's looking. No transfers made right now, of course, but we need to talk about exactly what my plans are with Saka and Ollie Watkins. So what should we do with Saka in our teams? As I mentioned, if you don't have the wildcard available, I think it is just an obvious move to keep him over the fixtures that they have. Yes, they are tricky. Bournemouth away, I still think isn't a great game. Liverpool at home, Newcastle away, Chelsea away. But let's be real, could they score against those teams, especially Newcastle and Chelsea? 100%. So I think Saka is more than fine to keep over that period, especially as I mentioned, if you don't have an easy way back to him in game week 12. But of course, in my situation, with the wildcard available in game week 12, I do like the opportunity of jumping on one of Foden or Palmer. I would love to consider Son at Spurs, but I still don't know his injury status. We know that he's been training, but we don't really know how many minutes he is going to get. So I'm a little bit hesitant on Son, even though I would love to consider him in this conversation. So I've just tried to make it very, very clear here for my own thought process. So firstly, we're not going to get nothing on Saka from Arteta. That is just very clear. We might, though, get some photos of players travelling to Bournemouth on the coach or at the hotel. But again, we have seen it so many times where players travel and don't play, don't travel and still play because they arrive later on outside of the group. So I still am not going to really judge anything on the photos that we might get from Arsenal. So what we have now, the information, is what we're going to get regardless of anything else. So Saka is just going to be a doubt, and you need to build your own narrative of whether you think he's going to play. As I mentioned, for me, there are 2 players that I want to consider, Foden and Palmer, at very different price points. I can't just do Saka to Palmer. That would require me making a second free transfer and downgrading another asset. So I have a very clear thought on this. If I was to bring in Cole Palmer, it wouldn't be for this game week. I think Liverpool away just makes no sense to bring him in. It would be for game week 9 because, yes, game week 9 is against Newcastle, then Man United, and then Arsenal. But I actually don't think Newcastle and United are terrible fixtures for Chelsea. Arsenal will be what it will be in game week 11. But I'd even argue Arsenal's game away against Chelsea, difficult fixture regardless. So if I was to bring in Palmer, I would wait until game week 9, and then that would require me actually rolling my transfer. I would be very, very certain on that because I also think Mbeumo needs to be brought in game week 9. So what I would do is roll my transfer into game week 9, and then I would bring in Cole Palmer, I'd bring in Brian Mbeumo, and I most likely would then have to sacrifice someone like an Ollie Watkins to bring in Solanke to free up the funds for all of these moves accumulated. And I actually think that's a really solid move. I prefer Palmer over Foden because he isn't playing in the Conference League compared to Foden in the Champions League. And we know he's the talisman. He's on everything in that Chelsea team. So part of me does think maybe wait a week and just get the player, the premium that I truly want in my team. However, if I am tempted by Phil Foden, it has to be now. Because if you try and wait 1 week and bring him in for game week 9, you're going to learn nothing. It's another game week where maybe De Bruyne then returns. You've gained no information in game week 8, and then you've passed up on the opportunity to bring him in against Wolves, who are one of the worst defences in the league. So if we're selling Saka, it has to be now for Phil Foden in game week 8. And I am very tempted by it. I cannot lie to you. I just feel like with the opportunity with the wildcard, I very much am just looking at jumping on players that really can do the damage at their ownership. And at 5% owned, this feels like what Cole Palmer was like in those game week 6 wildcards. With Wolves away, Southampton at home. If he starts both of those games, it really does feel like an opportunity for some mega hauls over that period. So I'm not going to spoil it, but Foden is absolutely on my radar. But I also am considering that opportunity to do 3 transfers in game week 9 to bring in Cole Palmer. Let me know what you're doing with Saka in the comments. So taking a look at my game week 8 team selection, and first up the goalkeeper and defenders. Again, Henderson away against Nottingham Forest is not a good fixture at all. I don't expect Nottingham Forest to score a ton of goals in any fixture, it's worth noting. But again, Palace defensively have been pretty damn poor. But is it worth me making a goalkeeper transfer? Absolutely not. So we're just going to pray for a penalty save or some save points at least for Henderson in game week 8. Sometimes the game weeks we really don't expect it, those hauls do come. So fingers crossed that does happen this week. Moving into the defenders, and again, that hasn't really been my priority. With the problem with Bukayo Saka being flagged, with other players really stinking up the team, I don't think the double Liverpool defence is something that I need to address. Do I expect Chelsea to get opportunities? Yes. But also, would it be out of the realms of possibility of Liverpool keeping a clean sheet against Chelsea? No. I think Arne Slot is doing a really good job of controlling games for Liverpool. They're not playing basketball football like Klopp. So what I do like is actually double Liverpool defence, even for the attacking output against this Chelsea team that are always finding ways to concede goals. So no, I am not desperate to make the move. A few people spoke to me about maybe bringing in Vardial, but then that blocks me off of a potential pick of Phil Foden later down the line. So I am not that keen on that. Rico Lewis away against Wolves, I personally expect to play. I always expect Rico Lewis to play in games where Man City are going to dominate the ball, and players don't really have those players to hurt them in transition. So I think Rico Lewis is definitely a great pick for game week 8. And worst case scenario, Robinson can come in at home against Aston Villa where he can replace him. So goalkeeper and defence are looking absolutely fine going into game week 8. Now, take a look at the midfielders, and as you can see, we currently have Phil Foden in the team. Now, I've got to put it out there. I haven't made the transfer yet because it would be foolish of me to make a move without those Friday press conferences. And to be honest with you, nowadays, I just wait until Saturday mornings as well because team leaks are so prevalent in the game. Yes, we won't get anything for Man City or Arsenal, for example, but if we get something from Spurs, that could throw a curveball out there, you never know, in terms of certain player selection and differentials. So I haven't made the move, but as of right now, with my understanding of Saka being touch and go for the game, I fully expect him to play. I'm still very, very tempted to bring in Phil Foden away against Wolves. As I spoke about, if I'm going to bring in Phil Foden, it has to be now. I don't think there's ever a good time to sell Bukayo Saka because he's such a consistent player, and with him being so fantastic on the bonus points, all it requires him is an assist from a corner and he's racking up the bonus points. Phil Foden is very, very risky. We don't know how many minutes he's going to play. We don't know where he's going to play in that City team. And to be honest with you, we don't even know what kind of form he's in. He's played very little minutes for Man City. And of course, very indifferent over the summer. So we're not actually seeing the best of Phil Foden right now. And that is my only hesitancy of going for Phil Foden is he actually as a player there right now, or maybe is his mind elsewhere? Because we know his fitness is always good. It's just whether his mentality is there. And that's just the only thing that I'm doubting. But as of right now, at the time of recording, I feel like with the wildcard available in game week 12, I want that opportunity over the next 4 game weeks. And I do feel like it could be Phil Foden. At the end of this video, I will show you an opportunity where I go for Palmer instead, just to show you the different routes that we can go for with the team, as you might let me know in the comment section which one you prefer, the Phil Foden route or the Cole Palmer route as we go along. Outside of that, Diogo Jota at home against Chelsea, really happy to keep him in the team, especially with Chelsea not having Cucurella or Fofana available. I think that only improves the Liverpool attack. Rodgers away against Fulham, I really don't like this fixture as I mentioned, but Rodgers is okay to keep this week. Eze away against Forest, again, don't love the fixture. Weirdly enough, I really like how Smith Rowe at home against Villa looks. I think that's a good opportunity for Smith Rowe in this game, and he's a bit more of a differential as managers did sell him off. And I do fully expect him to come back into that Fulham team. I think he was only out of it in game week 7 because it was Man City away and they needed legs in that midfield to match up with the way that they were dominating the game. So that is my current plan, Saka to Foden. Let's take a look at the forwards. Now moving into the forwards, of course I am keeping Erling Haaland, no surprises there. But I also plan on keeping Ollie Watkins. Now, again, as I mentioned, I really think Fulham away is a tricky game. And I have been looking at downgrading Watkins to Dominic Solanke. But when I look at the next 2 game weeks, Watkins is away against Fulham and then at home against Bournemouth. Whereas Solanke is at home against West Ham and then away against Crystal Palace. Now, I do think Spurs slightly have better fixtures. But over those 2 game weeks, I actually think it's going to be very close between both of them on how they score their points. I think Watkins at home against Bournemouth could be a brilliant game. And so for that very reason, I think maybe just keeping Watkins for the next 2 weeks is the route to go for, and then using him as a cash cow to downgrade in game week 10 to someone like a Dominic Solanke. Yes, I may have missed out on some of those Spurs goals, but I still think Watkins has fantastic value and his underlying numbers are still the best of all forwards outside of Erling Haaland. One other move that I could do is changing Muniz to someone like a Chris Wood, and then that would mean benching someone like a Rodgers this week, which I actually think is a debate to be had. But is it a priority transfer for my team? I don't feel like it is. Something I could consider, but as of right now, this is my transfer plan. Saka to Foden and keeping the team how it is. Now, of course, in terms of captaincy, there is nothing to be spoken about with my specific team. It's on Erling Haaland. Some people are talking about triple captaincy. You can do it. Personally, I am not all for that. So Erling Haaland with the captaincy, Foden with the vice captaincy. Now, a lot of people say don't put the vice captaincy on a player in the same team in case certain things happen, like a game cancellation. And that is valid, to be fair. Things can happen. We've seen that happen at times. But I'm just going to put it on Phil Foden, because if Haaland doesn't play, Foden most likely plays in a super attacking role, maybe even as a false 9. And it'll be a no-brainer me putting the vice captaincy on him. If I was to change it somewhere else, I don't really like anybody in this team. It probably would be a rogue pick on like Trent or something, for example, just in case he was to get those huge double-digit returns. If you're one of those managers that doesn't have Erling Haaland, then of course it is quite a tricky pick this week. But I probably would lean towards Mo Salah, just with the absence of Cucurella, the slight problems Chelsea have defensively. I think Mo Salah is actually a solid bet this weekend to go there. In terms of differentials, it probably then would be on someone like a Bukayo Saka, but do you trust his minutes? That is the big question mark. But for me, it's a no-brainer. Erling Haaland for captaincy. So finally, just giving you an example of how my team might look in the upcoming game weeks, because as I mentioned, my team is very much looking at just a 4 game week period between game weeks 8 and game weeks 11 before that game week 12 wildcard. So first up, here's how the team is looking with that potential transfer of Saka to Phil Foden, and then obviously rolling the other transfer, and that will give me 0.8 million in the bank. So coming into game week 9, to give an example of how my team would then look, Robinson can more than happily come in for Robertson, a bit of a tongue twister there, and I think the rest of the team looks absolutely fine. But of course, the main fixture that I do not have any ownership with, that you can see at the bottom here, is going to be Brentford at home against Ipswich. And I always had Jota out for Mbeumo earmarked for this game week. So one of the free transfers that I absolutely would make is going to be Diogo Jota to Brian Mbeumo. God forbid what his price will be at that point. But then the team would look like this. And again, a reason why I wanted to keep Ollie Watkins is because then I look at this with Bournemouth at home and I feel really good about that. Yes, I could have had Dominic Solanke away against Crystal Palace. And I don't think that's terrible at all, but I feel a little bit happier seeing Watkins in my team. And the rest of the squad, I actually don't think is desperate for any other moves in that specific week. So looking at the fixtures, outside of that, yes, I don't have another somebody like a Spurs asset in that game away against Palace, but I think if I'm going to avoid Spurs in game week 8, I'm also going to avoid them in game week 9. So coming into game week 10 with my team, with Brian Mbeumo, of course, in the squad, I then would most likely be looking to bring in Brian Mbeumo for Rodgers, which makes complete sense with the team. And again, when I look at this squad here, I think it looks really solid, but this would be the time where I would finally, most likely, part ways with Ollie Watkins. And if we've seen good things, Dominic Solanke then would come in for their attractive fixtures against Villa. And I believe they also have a great game week 11 fixture as well. And game week 10 then, again, looks really solid for that week. A few issues maybe with Eze away against Wolves, but if Wolves are still in a bad place, that could be a brilliant differential that week. And looking at game week 10, just the top, obviously, ranked fixtures there, I don't really feel that compelled to have any other team in my squad. If we filter it based on tough games, Newcastle at home against Arsenal, very tricky. Man United against Chelsea, again, very tricky. I don't feel like I'm missing out on much. And finally, game week 11, just to take a look at my team, we would see it here. And again, it's all about who am I missing in game week 11. If we come down to the fixtures, I've got Brentford in my team. We've got Palace at home against Fulham, which I think looks good. I haven't got any Man United, but is anyone that worried about that? So I think with that, the team would look good. And then the wildcard in game week 12 would give me loads of free transfers in the bank. Now, the other move that I need to show you, of course, is the Cole Palmer direction. I'll be very interested to know which one you guys prefer. So game week 8, if I was to go down the Cole Palmer route, I would roll my transfer once again to give me full flexibility going into game week 9. And again, if I was to be left with this team for game week 8, I don't think it's terrible at all. I think Saka could easily outscore Phil Foden in any game week. So coming into game week 9, this is where the moves would have to be made to bring in Cole Palmer. So Saka out for Cole Palmer, Diogo Jota would be coming out for Mbeumo, but as you can see, we're 0.9 million short. And in that, I think it would be unfortunately time to maybe sacrifice someone like an Ollie Watkins, which I really wouldn't want to do at home against Bournemouth. But just for cash cow's sake, let's say I was to sell Ollie Watkins for Dominic Solanke as part of maybe more of a long-term move. And I can already see the problem of me being very, very reluctant to make that move in game week 9. Maybe I could sacrifice someone like a Trent, which maybe makes more sense with the squad. And that is something that I actually could consider maybe doing, just to give you guys an example, actually getting rid of a Trent as my cash cow and go into someone like a Vardy out if I was tempted to go there. Either direction works, but let's say I do go for the option of getting Ollie Watkins out and bringing in Dominic Solanke. Apologies. And the team would look like that for game week 9 with Cole Palmer in the squad, which I do think looks very, very appealing. Obviously, Robinson would come in for Robertson. Then coming into game week 10, again, I have all of the fundamentals that the previous squad would have. It is just Palmer versus Phil Foden. And of course, I get rid of Watkins 1 week earlier. But then the team basically comes to the same sort of position. And I do think Palmer looks pretty good in this team. So again, guys, I just want to give you a visualization of what is potentially happening. Let me know in the comments. Would you go down the Cole Palmer route or would you go down the Phil Foden route? Let me know. Yes, guys, okay, that's going to wrap up today's Game Week 8 team selection video. As you can see, I am very tempted to get rid of Bukayo Saka, whether it be this week or next for Cole Palmer. I just think it makes a lot of sense to be aggressive over this period. So please do let me know what you do in the comments. And of course, what are your plans? And if you have any final Game Week 8 questions, if you enjoyed it, drop a like, smash the subscribe button, and I will see you on tomorrow's Deadline Live. Take care. Cheers.